On a quiet June afternoon in 2007, in the small city of Minot, North Dakota, a place where most people believed evil rarely set foot, a locked student apartment door opened to reveal a nightmare with no end. Anita Knutson, just 18 years old, a freshman at Minot State University, was a gentle young woman with a simple yet radiant dream to become an elementary school teacher, inspiring children the way her own teachers once inspired her. Her future stretched before her, warm, bright, and full of promise. But only a few days later, when her father, Gordon, worried, after days of silence, came knocking on her door, he walked into a scene no parent should ever see. Anita lay lifeless on her own bed. 2 stab wounds pierced her chest, the bedsheets soaked in blood, and a small pocket knife, still bearing the horror, had been rinsed off hastily in the sink. The apartment remained neat, almost untouched. The door was locked from the outside, as if no intruder had ever broken in. Yet the bedroom window screen had been slashed open and tossed on the ground, a staged lie designed to mislead. A young, innocent girl. Why did she have to die this way? Was the killer a faceless stranger in the night, or someone familiar enough to enter without knocking? The answers never came easily. From that moment on, the entire Minot community was pulled into a haunting journey, one that would stretch across nearly 2 decades, chasing justice that always seemed to slip back into the shadows. To understand why the murder of Anita Knutson shook the community of Minot so deeply, we need to step back and look at the life she was living. Simple, bright, but with tiny cracks. No one noticed until it was too late. Anita was born in Butte, North Dakota, and adopted as a baby by Gordon and Sharon Knutson. She grew up surrounded by love, alongside her brother Daniel and her younger sister Anna. People remembered Anita as gentle and selfless, always the first to help, always carrying herself with quiet kindness. At Velva High School, she excelled academically, becoming the kind of student every teacher admired. Inspired by those teachers, she set her sights on a dream of her own. One day, she would stand in front of a classroom and guide children with the same warmth she had been given. In the fall of 2006, Anita began her freshman year at Minot State University, majoring in elementary education. Determined not to be a burden on her parents, she carried multiple part-time jobs. Mornings and afternoons were filled with classes, and after school, she scrubbed hotel rooms at the Fairfield Inn, folded clothes, and helped customers at Vanity in the local mall, and even worked phone shifts at the telecare call center. It was a grueling schedule, but it showed her resilience, her independence, and her devotion to the future she wanted. She moved off campus into a modest student apartment, sharing it with another young woman, Nicole Thomas, who would later marry and change her name to Nicole Rice. At first, the independence thrilled Anita, but cracks soon appeared. There were disagreements about chores, frustrations about noise, and most memorably, a dispute over Nicole's pet fish that died after Anita accidentally unplugged the filter. Small conflicts, the kind most roommates have. No one thought such trivial irritations could ever lead to tragedy. Still, Anita's world revolved around schoolwork and family. No matter how busy she was, she called her mother Sharon every night. Those conversations were ordinary stories about classes, about shifts at the hotel, about what she had for dinner. They were never cries for help, never signs of fear. Friday, June 1st, 2007 was no different. Anita went to class in the morning, worked her shift at the Fairfield Inn in the afternoon, and called her mom that evening. Everything felt normal. With Nicole gone for the weekend, Anita likely spent the night quietly at home reading or listening to music. Saturday morning, June 2nd, was when alarm bells first rang. Anita didn't show up for her scheduled shift at the hotel. It was completely out of character. Coworkers tried calling, but the phone rang unanswered. Back in Butte, Sharon grew uneasy as her daughter failed to return her calls. By Sunday, June 3rd, the silence was unbearable. There were only a few scattered text messages Anita sent to a friend at around 2 o'clock in the morning, short, casual exchanges that hinted at nothing wrong. But those would be the last messages ever sent from her phone. On Monday, June 4th, Gordon could no longer ignore his dread. He drove from Butte to Minot to check on Anita. Her car was still in the parking lot, a flicker of hope, but no one answered the door. When he peered through the window, he saw the screen slashed and lying on the ground. Inside, he glimpsed the outline of his daughter, motionless on her bed. The life of an 18-year-old full of promise and dreams of teaching ended in that silent apartment. And from that moment on, the city of Minot would never be the same. The sight emptied Anita Knutson's apartment, left even seasoned officers unsettled. It was not just the scene of a murder, it was a paradox. Chilling violence cloaked in eerie stillness. Anita lay motionless on her bed, her body partially covered with a robe. Blood had seeped through the sheets, but the rest of the apartment looked disturbingly ordinary. Nothing was overturned, nothing ransacked, nothing broken. It was as if the killer had moved with quiet precision, striking swiftly and then vanishing without case, leaving only 2 stab wounds to her chest. One of them pierced her heart, quick and merciless. The most striking piece of evidence was the small pocket knife found in the kitchen sink. The blade was smeared with Anita's blood, but the handle had been rinsed, as if someone had tried to wash away their touch. Investigators asked themselves, did the killer bring this knife, or did they grab it from inside the apartment? Either way, the fact that it was washed and left behind suggested recklessness mixed with a calculation. Another detail puzzled detectives. The front door was locked from the outside. That meant the killer either had a key or was someone Anita trusted enough to let inside. And yet the slashed bedroom window screen lay on the ground outside, a crude attempt to stage the scene to make it look like an intruder had slipped in through the night. Lieutenant Dan Strandberg and his team sealed the crime scene. Forensic technicians dusted for prints, collected fibers, swabbed surfaces, bagged the knife, and recorded every inch with photographs. But the results only deepened the mystery. There were no foreign fingerprints of value, no muddy shoe prints under the window. The crime looked less like a break-in, more like the work of someone who knew exactly how to move inside without leaving a trace. The family's grief collided with the investigation. Gordon recounted his discovery: the sullen door, the slashed screen, the sight of his daughter under that joy. Sharon remembered her last phone call, Anita's voice calm and ordinary. And Anna, only 15 at the time, would later say her world crumbled that day, the moment she lost not just a sister, but her sense of safety. Detectives turned quickly to those closest to Anita. Co-workers from the Fairfield Inn and Vanity confirmed she was reliable, to the point of routine. Her absence on June 2nd was unthinkable. Friends at Minot State described her as kind, grounded, with no enemies. Attention naturally turned to her roommate, Nicole Thomas, who had been away that weekend. Nicole admitted there had been small arguments about chores and noise, but insisted there was nothing serious. She maintained she was out of town visiting family when Anita died. Still, people around Anita confirmed those small irritations existed. Nicole was upset about her fish dying after Anita unplugged the filter, or annoyed about being woken by Anita's early alarm. Trivial matters, yes, but repeated often enough to plant seeds of tension. Meanwhile, the wider community was shaken. Minot, a city of about 40,000, was not a place where young women were murdered in their beds. Newspapers carried the story daily. Candlelight vigils were held. Police held press conferences urging anyone with tips to come forward. A man was reportedly seen running from the area on June 3rd, sparking speculation, but he was never identified. Yet the evidence inside the apartment whispered a different story. The killer was no stranger slipping in under cover of night. This was someone familiar, someone who could lock the door behind them, someone who knew Anita well enough to walk through her quiet life and leave it shattered in silence. In the first days after Anita's death, the Minot police were flooded with tips. Everyone wanted to help solve the case. But as the days turned into weeks, every promising lead dissolved into nothing. By mid-June of 2007, police even released a sketch of a man reportedly seen running near Anita's apartment on the night of June 3rd. The community clung to hope, but no one ever identified him. Roofing contractors working nearby were questioned, but their alibis checked out. Another tip mentioned a group of Spanish-speaking men in the area, but detectives could never connect them to the crime. By the end of that year, after dozens of interviews and countless hours of lab testing, investigators had to admit the truth: they were no closer to finding Anita's killer. The case was officially classified as cold. The Knutson family refused to give up. They raised and maintained a $20,000 reward for any information, desperate to shake something loose. Calls trickled in, but most went nowhere. Then tragedy struck again. In 2013, Anita's older brother Daniel, crushed by grief and the weight of unanswered questions, took his own life. Years later, Anna would say bitterly, "Anita didn't just die once. Her death also took my brother, and it stole my childhood." Meanwhile, the case file gathered dust in a storage room at the Minot Police Department. But forensic science was advancing. In 2016, state labs retested the pocketknife. The blade still confirmed Anita's blood, but on the handle, analysts detected a degraded mixed DNA profile. Too weak for the national database, yet strong enough to rule out several male suspects. What it did not do was exclude female connections, including Anita's roommate at the time. It was a small but critical shift in focus. Even so, it wasn't until 2018, when a fresh set of eyes took the file, that momentum returned. Detective Macaulay Talbot, new to the case, had no old assumptions weighing her down. She painstakingly reread every transcript, re-interviewed old witnesses, and examined contradictions in statements. One area drew sharper attention: the uneasy relationship between Anita and her roommate Nicole Thomas, now known by her married name, Nicole Rice. The true breakthrough came in 2021, when the television program Cold Justice partnered with Minot Police. Their producers and investigators tracked down old acquaintances of Nicole. What they uncovered was stunning. Multiple people claimed Nicole had confessed years earlier, usually while drunk at parties. One friend recalled Nicole slurring her words, saying she stabbed Anita and then covered her body with a robe, a detail never released publicly. An ex-boyfriend confirmed a similar confession, and an aunt later admitted Nicole once muttered chillingly that Anita deserved to die. On March 16, 2022, after 15 years of frustration, Minot Police arrested Nicole Rice for the murder of her former roommate. For Anita's family, the moment felt like long-awaited justice. At a press conference, Gordon and Sharon wept openly, believing at last that the truth was close. But the arrest was only the beginning. The case was headed for trial, and the courtroom would decide whether those long-buried confessions and fragile strands of DNA could stand as proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What had been a frozen file in a police archive was suddenly alive again, burning under the spotlight. And with it came the same question that had haunted Minot for nearly 2 decades. Would Anita Knutson finally have justice, or would the darkness win once more? In March of 2025, nearly 18 years after Anita Knutson was killed, the case finally entered the courtroom. Nicole Rice, formerly Nicole Thomas, Anita's college roommate, now stood accused of murder. The trial was moved to Grand Forks, North Dakota, to avoid local bias. For Anita's family sitting silently in the gallery, this was the moment they had fought for almost 2 decades to see. Prosecutors painted a picture of mounting resentment. 2 young women sharing a cramped apartment, clashing over chores, alarm clocks, and even a fish tank. What seemed like trivial roommate quarrels, they argued, built into quiet hostility. And on that June weekend in 2007, that hostility exploded. They presented testimony from co-workers at the telecare call center. Several remembered Nicole venting angrily about Anita, saying she couldn't take it anymore. One incident in particular, the unplugged fish tank filter that killed Nicole's fish, became a symbol of their friction. But the most damning evidence came from alleged confessions. Witnesses recounted moments when Nicole, drunk and unguarded, admitted stabbing Anita. A friend recalled her saying Anita looked so peaceful under a robe afterward, a detail never released to the public. Nicole's ex-boyfriend confirmed a similar confession during a car ride home from a party. Even her aunt testified that Nicole once muttered chillingly, "Anita deserved to die."
It was so horrible, she said, to just see Anita lying there. But she looked so peaceful, covered up.
Did she say
with a robe, and said that there was a bowl of water in the bathroom sink, that whoever did this washed themselves up and washed the knife up.
Did Nicole ever say anything to you specifically about Anita deserving to die?
Yes.
What'd she say?
She deserved to die.
Forensic experts strengthened the case. Anita was stabbed twice in the chest while in bed, with no defensive wounds, suggesting she was asleep. The pocket knife found in the sink carried Anita's blood on the blade. The handle contained degraded DNA that could not exclude Nicole Rice. Rice's attorneys fought back fiercely. They insisted there was no direct evidence, no fingerprints on the knife, no eyewitness placing her at the scene, no DNA conclusive enough to convict. Motive, they argued, was far too flimsy. The college roommates argued everywhere, and most did not kill each other. They attacked the confessions as drunken gossip surfacing more than a decade later, only after cold justice reignited attention. Memories that old, especially fueled by alcohol, were unreliable, and they argued that witnesses might have been influenced by the lure of publicity. A former FBI agent turned private investigator testified for the defense, pointing out overlooked leads: the man seen running from the apartment complex, the roofing workers, and the Spanish-speaking group reported nearby. He claimed police ignored these possibilities, focusing instead on Nicole. Once the television show created pressure, Nicole herself did not take the stand. Her attorneys portrayed her as a woman who had moved on with her life, holding stable employment at the Air Force Base, marrying twice, raising no alarms in the years after Anita's death. Hardly the profile of a cold-blooded killer. On March 26, 2025, after 7 grueling days of testimony and more than 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom went silent as Judge Richard Hagar read the decision. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Nicole Erin Rice, not guilty." Nicole collapsed into tears, clinging to her lawyers. Her family wept and cheered in relief. But across the aisle, Anita's family sat frozen. Gordon stared straight ahead. Sharon lowered her head. And Anna, Anita's younger sister, walked out without a word. Later she wrote, "A not guilty verdict does not mean innocence. My conscience is clear, unlike the conscience of that jury." 18 years after Anita's death, the trial ended not with justice but with silence. Anita's killer had not been named by the law, and Minot once again was left with nothing but questions. The words "not guilty" on March 26, 2025 closed one chapter of a nearly 2-decade-long saga, but it did nothing to close the wound. For the Knutson family, The verdict was not relief. It was another cut, layered on top of the pain that had never healed. They lost Anita in 2007. They lost Daniel to despair in 2013. And now, they had lost their last fragile hope that the justice system would give meaning to their fight. What remains is memory. For those who loved her, Anita is still the 18-year-old girl with a gentle smile who dreamed of teaching children and shaping futures. But for those who remember the crime scene, other images remain: the slashed window screen, the pocket knife left in the sink, the robe draped over her still body. They are symbols of a darkness that invaded a quiet city, proof that evil can slip into even the safest places. The verdict may have set Nicole Rice free, but it did not answer the questions that still haunt this case. Why did Anita miss her work shift on June 2nd? Who sent those text messages from her phone at 2 o'clock in the morning? If not Nicole, then who walked through that locked apartment door, silent and ruthless? For the Knutsons, justice is no longer measured by a court ruling. Justice means refusing to let Anita's name fade, keeping her story alive so that her life carries weight beyond the tragedy. As her sister Anna once said, "A not guilty verdict does not mean the truth has been revealed." If you're watching this story now, remember Anita. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe justice was truly served? And if you want to follow more cases where truth and darkness collide, subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the only way to fight forgetting is to keep telling the story.